Hello, you wonderful people, and welcome to another episode of Not Too Comic Book. This being a show where I talk about TV shows that are adaptations of comic books. For today's episode, I'm going to talk about the latest episode of Supergirl, Gotham, as well as Lucifer. Like always, if I'm talking about a show that you don't want to listen to, you can always look in the description down below and I include the time of when I talk about each of the respective shows. So, for example, if you don't want to hear what I have to say about Supergirl, you can skip to what I have to say about Gotham, or you can skip to what I have to say about Lucifer. But the first thing I'm going to talk about is this week's episode of Supergirl. First of all, I got to bring up the fact is, I love slow motion, and there was so much good slow motion in this episode. The first bit, obviously, when Kara and Mon-El are training and everything, it just looks so sick. Like, he's like jumping over, kind of parkouring over that thing, and you have Kara kind of jumping over and spinning in there. It's like, it's completely unnecessary, but it's so cool. Okay, superhero wise, obviously, like anything that's unnecessary is always necessary because it's super cool. That's just how it works. And also later on when Kara, Jimmy, and Mon-El worked together to take down those people, like, that was kind of cool. Slow motion, kind of like working as like a team. And in that moment when like the battle was over and all three of them were like back to back, I was like, that's some superhero posing, dude. That was so sick. So kind of running down everything that's happened in this episode. You have kind of the situation coming out that basically, well, Kara finding out about Jimmy being Guardian and being super pissed about it, especially because she finds out everyone knew about it except for Mon-El. Mon-El's like, oh, I didn't know about it. I love how he just like, even under the circumstances, he's like, yo, like, phew, man, Jimmy, how'd you get that bite? That's so sick, dude. But nevertheless, Kara is super upset because for her, she's like, you're human. Why would you be doing this? Like, you know, like, I can't protect you if you're doing this. He's like, I don't need your protection. Like, he's like, the fact is, I've always wanted to help out people. That's always what I wanted to do. The same thing as you know, saying that basically he's always helped people out in his own way, but it was never enough. And it's like, now that he's doing this, he feels good. He feels like he's really being the real him that he's always been. But what I love most about it, you know, because drama and everything, it brings distance between Jimmy and Kara, because Kara is super against it, because she's like, you can't be a hero, like, you're only human. Which at the same time, I'm like, aren't you being a little, for multiple things. One, you didn't have powers back in season 1 yet. That didn't stop you from trying to help people. Like, there was that point where she had lost her abilities back in season 1, but she still, like, you know, put herself in danger trying to help people even without her powers. So there's that. 2, let's not forget most people who you work with are humans. Let's not forget your sister's kind of kick ass and she's human, but I don't see you giving her the same situation. I mean, I'm thinking there's also, I don't know, I guess it's because of who Jimmy is that she's like, Jimmy, you're just a regular dude. Alex has at least had some government training. You're just based on, you know. But at the same time, it's like Jimmy can hold his own. Like, he's proven that time and time again. Plus, he has wind to back him up. But it's just, like I said, it's just so interesting. It's like a little hypocritical. For her, she's like, oh, the only person, obviously Mon-El, it has to be Mon-El because he's the only one with powers. And then you have Jimmy being like, are you kidding me? You can't trust Mon-El. He only cares about himself. Literally, the only reason why he's doing this, wanting to be a hero, is for his own selfish reasons. Also because he likes you. Because there's a whole circumstance when, like, she told him to guard those police officers, and, like, she was kind of in trouble, and he went to back her up. And basically, he ended up deflecting one of the bolts, and it almost hit one of the cops, but Jimmy blocked it. Now, to be fair, no matter how pissed Kara is, it's like he's got the whole point is to have your partners back in the situation. She was, you know, in a pickle, had 2 lightning people, you know, tossing her around. Which at the same time, I'll admit, I forgot that was like a whole thing about Livewire, which obviously her whole circumstances, but I'll get to that soon enough. I really like the fact is of using lightning whips like that. I don't remember her using that in season 1. Like, you know, most likely it did happen. Well, terrible memory and everything, right? But still, like, even if that did come up again, like, even if it came up in season 1, I'm acknowledging it now. Like, that is sick. And I also love the fact is that she's Supergirl's nemesis. And then I thought about it, I was like, now that you think about it, like, she is, like, technically Kara's only recurring enemy, at least from season 1, because, you know, most of her enemies from season 1 were just one-off enemies, like the aliens from the prison, Fort Ross, the Kryptonians. So it's like, now that they've been kind of dealt with, it's like, you know, Livewire is the only one that kind of came up. I don't know. The fact is, when it came to her, Wynn kind of mentions like, oh man, the fact is that, yeah, she'll come here, just live wire, come here and just turn your girlfriend into a villain, turn her evil or something like that, referencing Banshee. Which does beg the question. I wonder, like, since we did get live wire, I wonder will we get Banshee or not this season? Poor Siobhan. I mean, I would like to kind of, well, I'm sure that's kind of dealt with. I don't know if that's ever going to be something that comes back up. I mean, they've kind of already established her, so maybe it won't be an immediate thing, but she's always there in the reserves now that they've kind of established her and everything, so. But getting back to it was like, Kara confronts Mon-El about why he does what he does, which, yeah, there's a part of the reason is because he likes Kara. But I also do believe, that it is kind of the thing of like, he is, because Kara says like, oh, he can change and everything, being like, that he can stop being selfish and do things for the right reasons, which, he is also doing that too. I mean, you could also argue it's a selfish reason because for whatever. Obviously, I keep saying the whole Prit situation, but no matter what the circumstances is around that whole situation, when it comes to Dax, I'm like, it seems like he's trying to make up for his past by being a good person, but also, trying to do, so that's why I'm saying you could argue the whole selfish route because he's only doing it, trying to make himself feel better because it's like, he wasn't proud of, I'm pretty sure like the way he talks about like the prince and everything from Daxum, it seems like he wasn't that proud of himself, so who he was back then and probably felt useless and everything. So now that he has powers and he wants to do the right thing, especially because he wants to follow in Kara's footsteps, because no matter what the circumstances is, he wants to be by her side. But kind of taking that whole conversation Kara had with him about, or the whole conversation about Mon-El can change, she brought up the fact that Jimmy can. It's like, Jimmy has changed. He's not the same guy that he was before. He's no longer just following in Clark's footsteps. He's not just, I'm here following you. I'm like you could argue like some lovesick puppy that is like, oh, he's just there to be protected by his girlfriend type of situation. It's like, no, he's, stepping out of the shadows, out of their shadows and becoming his own hero. So, I mean, and you could argue it's like out of anyone, Kara should understand that better than anyone. She literally had to get out of her cousin's shadow to kind of establish herself. But once again, it's a situation of like, oh, I have powers and you don't. I mean, now that I'm thinking about it, you literally didn't have powers last episode. You were literally on an alien moon planet, and you stood up to bad people, and you had no powers. It's like, so once again, the hypocrisy behind it. But, you have Jimmy and Wynn being like, yo, Kara, like, come on, we'd love to work together and everything. It's like, we're not going to stop doing this. We're going to keep doing this. We'd rather work with you than against you. And then she's like, I won't stop you. You're going to follow this. You're going to get yourselves killed, but I will go for it. But I won't support you in this. And it's like, oh, dude, that sucks. It's like she's talking about the fact is that they were heroes before. Like, they're doing their own thing. Yes, it's very dangerous. And yes, they're human. But I can't stress the point. You literally work with humans on a regular basis that do stuff. You have a sister who gets literally in the middle of situations similar to them. And it's like, you have such a problem with it. That's what I just can't comprehend. I love when Jimmy and Mon-El show up to save Livewire, and she's like, okay, so what? Oh, where's Supergirl? It's like, oh, she's busy right now. It's like, oh, great. Now, oh, I'm being saved by you. Oh, goodness. And then like you even see Jimmy being like, what the hell? And then Mon-El shows up, and she's like, who are you? He's like, I'm the other Superman in training. And she's like, oh God. And your whole essentially calling his get up just terrible, and he's just like, that's not nice. But that was kind of a nice twist I liked to this episode, because it's like, oh, obviously Livewire broke out. She's the one masterminded it. Cause I was wondering, I was like, how did you give your powers to someone else? Because the police guard also had lightning powers like her. And it turns out, nope, some mad scientist played by Steve Valentine. Just a random assortment of things I've seen him over the years. But it's just like, he's one of those names that's like, oh, once I've learned his name, it's just always stuck in my head because I've seen him in different stuff. But nevertheless, he basically captured her. Like, she didn't break out of prison, like, she got captured. And basically, dude's been sucking out her powers and basically making copies of her. Hence, the person that Supergirl fought at the police station wasn't even Livewire. It was the woman that had escaped from prison. They needed someone that kind of looked like her just to make it seem like it was her. So that was kind of a nice twist. Because I'm sure, like, if she had gotten away, like, I don't know. She probably would have gone right after Supergirl, but I don't know. Once again, it's one of those supervillain motivations of like, yeah, she blames Supergirl for becoming the way she is. It's like Supergirl was trying to save you, but then it's the circumstance of like, that's what makes situations like that worse. It's like when you inadvertently create your own supervillain. Oliver knows that better than anyone, not even just in his current situation, but in the past too. Let's not forget the Slade situation, but also mentioning the whole Prometheus situation, creating your own nemesis. Technically, you could argue Barry did it. I mean, technically Barry did that, with the whole Flashpoint situation. I mean, technically he did it with Reverse Flash because by being the Flash, he ended up creating the Reverse Flash depending on what storyline they decide to stick with, or depending on what storyline you're familiar with when it comes to Reverse Flash's background. But that's not the point. We're focusing on Supergirl here. But it was also a situation where it's kind of like one of those moments of like, oh, the hero trying to talk to the villain and get them. It kind of reflects a little bit of what was in last week's episode of Arrow, where you had Oliver trying to talk to Black Siren, trying to get her to be good, and even then, at the end of it all, being like, "No, I still see some good in you." And Card does the same thing with Livewire, because it's like Livewire could have killed her at any point in time because Kara was down and she had the juice and she could have done it, but she didn't. She actually helped. And when Kara asked her not to kill the scientist dude, she didn't. She's like, "I will give you a head start," and stuff like that. She's like, "Fine, maybe next time we can join the forces. We can braid each other's hair." So that's kind of interesting. Then we also had Mon-El telling Kara, like, "Yep, straight up, I have feelings for you." And he's like, "I know you don't feel the same way to me. I know you don't care about me." She's like, "Oh, I do care about you." He's like, No, I understand, but you don't feel the same way." And he's like, because he initially lied and be like, "Yeah, I didn't know about the kiss." He once again lied and be like, "I don't remember the kiss." He's like, "I do." He's like, I don't know, it was almost like poetic the way he described it. He's like, "Your eyes are like comets." And he was like, at that moment, I would have been fine dying knowing that I was able to kiss you. And it's just because it's like, like I said, at the end of the day, it's a situation where it's like, even if he's there for the particularly wrong reasons, I mean, because you could honestly, you could say the same thing about Jimmy. Like, if you're playing devil's advocate, you could be like, Jimmy's only doing it because he's trying to prove something to everyone else that he can do this. Especially like, oh, he's trying to be a hero despite Kara to be like, "Yo, I can do this." You don't think, just like, "Oh, you think I can't do it? Oh, I can," just to prove himself. So it's kind of a similar situation where it's like, Mon-El's just trying to prove himself, to Kara, but I think more so than anything to himself too, and to other people that he can be relied on and everything. So. But he's like, "You know what? It's okay. Let's just don't give up on me. Let's be partners and everything. We'll just kind of move past this." And it seems like maybe there is a part of Kara that might possibly like him. I'm not sure though, but maybe, I don't know. Maybe it's a situation where I might be reading too much into it. It's like, I wouldn't mind her and Mono being together, but for her, I'm sure Kara has no interest in, a boyfriend or anything. It probably hasn't, continuity-wise, it probably hasn't been that long since her and Jimmy broke up. Plus, for her, she's focusing on her career, being Supergirl and everything, too. So it's just like, there's so much to kind of focus on, so. And the other side of things is the whole Magon and John situation. Which, hearing John is like, oh, he's worried about her and everything, but he's like, no, I'm not worried about her and everything. It's like, she can die for all I care. But you see it in his face that there is a part of him that does care at first, because he actually is concerned, but then he's like, I don't care what the circumstances is. The fact, because, Alex is like, oh, maybe you can bond with her mind because it's something mentally that's happening to her, like, her body being examined and everything, she seems perfectly fine, but it's all inside of her head and everything. Essentially, she got trapped in her own mind, but I'll get to that in a second. But, it's up to John to kind of do the whole mind-melding things that Green Martians do, but he's like, I refuse to do it with her. I'm not going to share my memories, because they're already linked together to a certain extent because they are Martians. Even her being a white Martian, him being a green Martian, doesn't change the fact is that they similar biology and similar way they work and everything. But John's like, no, she can rot and basically trapped in her own mind, drown in her memories, whatever it is that's killing her, if it means, she suffers for everything that she's done. But, even John will admit, he's like, he knows that truly believes that there is some truth to what Magon said about, wanting to help out the Green Martians and just being tired of it, like, trying to be the good guy. And for John, he's like, he does believe that, but he can't forgive her because forgiving her would mean no longer hating her. And for him, hate is the only thing that keeps him going because it's like, he's lost everything. He's lost his family, his people, it's like his heart no longer has love, and it's like without that hate, he'll be empty on the inside. And I like what Alex saying that basically forgiveness isn't necessarily just for the other person. It's for yourself because it's meant to help you kind of move on. And that's what helping McGon would help him do. And I did like the fact is that he was like, he was telling Alex and Kara to be there with him while he was mind melding with her, because it's like he knows that he was basically going to be going back to a hard time in his life for himself being inside of her head, and he needed those two to be there to kind of ground him because they're like, out of everyone in this world, they're the ones that keep him, because they're like the few people, like, because he always looks at them as if they were his own daughters. So. But going inside of her mind, she was just torturing herself. Find out a little bit more about the circumstances. Like, the fact is that the whole circumstances happened because they wanted her to kill a little boy. And, like, the little boy was so terrified and they were laughing about it. And she was like, no, I'm not going to do that. And so to protect the boy, she killed her own people and let the boy get away. And it's just for McGon, she's like, I don't deserve forgiveness. No matter what happened, me and my people, the atrocities that we committed cannot be forgiven. So it's like better that I just kind of die for everything. It's the best option. And John's like, no, it's not. Like, you did good that you helped out people. You were here for me. Like, cause she's like, I even lied to you what I was. I tried to pretend like to be a green Martian. And I knew it was a lie and everything, but it's just because I wanted, because she's like, I could feel I knew you were lonely. And so she became a Green Martian because she wanted to fill that void, because she wanted to be a friend to him, not have him worry about that. So that was kind of, and John is like, I forgive you, McGon. And it's like, it kind of brought her back and everything. Which to me, like, it changes the dynamic between them because, like I said, it's been a while since I've seen Justice League. Young Justice is what I meant to say. So I swore they were like uncle and niece. Like I said, that's probably like something the easiest way they could describe their relationship. I mean, obviously, Young Justice takes a different approach to it. Supergirl is taking a different approach than Young Justice. I'm sure Young Justice is closer to the comic books or whatever. I am curious, like, because there are certain DC characters that only pop up in stuff after they've kind of made appearances. Like, for instance, the Chloe Sullivan from Smallville wasn't in the comic books until after, like, Smallville got pretty big. It wasn't until much later. I think it was closer to the end of the series run that she became one. I think Artemis didn't become one until... I think Artemis's character... Like, there's a character in the DC universe. I think one of the characters that was Tigress, I think, was named Artemis. I vaguely remember reading that a while back, but I think Artemis became big in the comic books, kind of why she exists on Arrow too, is because of her on Young Justice. I guess people like the character so much, it's kind of that circumstances. Some other character was like that too, and I'm blanking on it so hard. Well, I mean, it's kind of crossing the molds a little bit, but Coulson, apparently, I didn't know that was a thing. Coulson, because I've seen Coulson pop up in not just the Avengers and obviously Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D., but also, obviously, the other standalone movies he popped up in previously before Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D. But he also was in, like, the Ultimate Spider-Man because he's, like, the principal at the school and everything. But apparently, Coulson didn't pop up until, like, around Avengers or whatever in the comic books because, people really liked him, but he didn't exist before then. So that was kind of a situation. I know crossing streams DC and Marvel, but just to me that was kind of the best example. So but the point I was trying to make is I'm just curious to know whether McGon was like in the comics before Young Justice or not. She probably was, but like I've never really read too much into her. But the point is, because a question kept popping in my head, like, throughout the episode, like, I was like, since we're dealing with the White Martians and everything, I was like, what about the White Martians? We've only had one experience with one, and that was back in season 1, so we've only come across 2 White Martians, so where are the rest of them? And then literally she's like, yeah, what happened to me was me, being attacked mentally by someone else trying to get inside of my head. I usually keep my guard up, but they kind of broke through it, and he's like, who could that be? She's like, other White Martians, they tracked me down. And it's like, literally got the answer I wanted. So that's so much is going forward, like, to see where it all goes. Like, how that's going to handle it. It's like Kara already had to deal with a slight alien invasion and a crossover and everything. It's like now she's got to deal with it again. So I'm very curious to see where the main storyline goes, because it's like Cadmus has kind of been dealt with to a certain extent. Lena's mom has been arrested and everything, so I'm curious, is Cadmus still going to be in the workings? I'm sure like she's the head of it and everything, but I'm sure there's a lot of people who follow her beliefs. Maybe that dude, Steve Valentine's character in this might be related to Cadmus, making experiments like that and everything. I mean, probably would make an exception because it's like Livewire isn't an alien. I mean, granted, her powers came about because of an alien, so it makes you wonder how Cadmus will look upon that. Her being, because they don't really use the term. The term only exists because of the Flash and Supergirl crossover, which, interesting enough, was the last time we saw Livewire. It's also kind of why I bought, I kind of like the fact that they bought up Banshee too, because Livewire helped unlock, turn Siobhan, helped turn her into Banshee, and also because that was the last time we saw either one of them was during that crossover. So, like I said, very good episode. Cannot wait to see where we go next time. And now moving on to this week's episode of Gotham. This episode picks up right where the last episode picked up. We're ended off with like Gotham being in the dark. All the lights are shut down. And we have Jerome basically making his first move. While all the chaos is going on, he decides to pay a visit to Bruce Wayne. Mainly because for him, Bruce was like the last thing he remembers, and the last thing he was trying to do was kill Bruce before he ended up dying. But obviously that got cut short and everything. So to him, it's like, oh, let me go ahead and go back to that and kill Bruce. That way I can kind of get my head back on straight, because his head's been a little frazzled since, coming back from the dead and everything. I mean, granted, I'm sure there's a part of his brain that's like, oh, there's a rationalization to that, but I'm also sure it's probably like, no, what I'm going to do, it's just the fact is that it was something I had my mind set on, and I'm going to go and do it. It kind of coincides with kind of like what Jerome represents, because he is a symbol. It's kind of an interesting take on the Joker. Like, obviously, I don't think Jerome's been set up to not be the Joker, but maybe he eventually gives influence to the Joker. That basically he's a symbol, and he symbolizes the Joker. That basically the Joker himself is a symbol, that because anyone could really adopt the personality, and as well as like the moniker, essentially. Because for Jerome, basically, he tells people like that everyone is crazy. Everyone that's going crazy during this whole situation in Gotham has already been like that. He just helped tap into what was already there. That basically they've let society shackle them down. That's kind of been his whole spiel this entire time. And he's like, people always want to do these bad things. They just needed someone to tell them to do it. But it's interesting to see not just, having this little tiny cult following. There are people spread across the city in different situations. Like last episode, we ended up finding out with some cops that kind of followed him and everything. People who believe wholeheartedly in what he says and does, because deep down he taps into something within him, the kind of darkness that's within them, that they've been living their lives depriving themselves of it, that they've kind of kept it locked up tight because of like, oh, these society norms of like, oh, what's right and what's wrong. And now with this, it's like, oh, they can throw caution to the wind. So I think, like, I've always appreciated what they've done with Jerome, and I feel like they've really stepped it up this season, like these past couple episodes showing that. So I thought that was kind of cool. He did end up breaking that statue, that the thing that leads to whatever it is. Obviously, we know you touch some light to it, it reveals a map or whatever. Bruce and Alfred still don't know about that, but plus Jerome broke it. I'm surprised. I would have thought something would have come about that, especially at the end of the episode with the light shining in through the window. I'll kind of get to that later on, but that was kind of a conversation for later. But the point is, I thought like at some point they'd be sitting there at the table or something, and they'll see the light hit it. I mean, I don't know not unless they end up sticking it back together. At first, I was thinking, oh, it couldn't break because of the way he dropped it and nothing happened. But then he tossed it over his shoulder and it shattered. And I was like, oh, never mind. So I'm assuming it's something they're going to have to piece back together. Or is it going to be a situation where a little bit of light touches it, and then they realize, like, oh, now we got to put it back together to get this whole map situation figured out. So, but anyway, Jerome takes Bruce to a circus because basically it's like, hey, need an audience for the spectacle, and ends up. It's a very messed up carnival circus where they're basically all the games, like there's one like kind of a whack-a-mole situation where they're using live people and using a gigantic mallet, and one of the people heads gets smashed in and blood spurts a little bit. Obviously very, very messed up games. Under those whole circumstances, like obviously you're having into a little bit more of seeing Jerome and the way he sways people, kind of, it's not even like I said before, it's not even really sway. It's just like, he's there to kind of be the guiding hand for a lot of these people. But I thought it was kind of interesting how, he set everything up trying to kill Bruce and everything, but Bruce was able to get away. I like that he used the staples that were in his hand as a lockpick for those cuffs. And then he leads Jerome into the House of Mirrors. And I was like, oh, dude, because Bruce had that moment where he was just like, no, I believe there are good people out there, that, the city isn't just filled with bad people. There are good people, too. And just kind of having that moment of standing up to him and everything. And then it concludes in the House of Mirrors where he fights Jerome and he literally beats the crap out of him, repeatedly punching him to the point Jerome's face is breaking, peeling off. Obviously later on it gets completely knocked off when you have Jim punching him and completely knocking his face off, which still makes my skin crawl a little bit seeing that. I was kind of hoping the fact is that his face landed in water that meant that it was permanently messed up. For some reason, I don't know, hoping that it messed up his face so he could never actually get it back or something. I don't know. Because it seems like, obviously, it's this, it's Bruce tapping into kind of a bit of a darkness that's inside of him. That he, basically when he was punching Jerome, he picked up a piece of glass and he wanted to kill him, but he looked at himself in the mirror and he stopped himself. But, he was talking to Alfred later on and he was like, there was a part of him that felt like it would have been the right thing to do after everything Jerome's done, all the people he's hurt, all the people he's killed, all the chaos that he's caused around Gotham City. It's like, it would have been justice to do that. But then, Alfred was like, there is a fine line between justice and vengeance. And Bruce is like, yeah, but I didn't cross that. And he's like, yeah, that basically after everything I've trained you for, obviously, is to learn how to defend yourself. But going forward, you're going to need rules. And it's kind of like, I look, it's little bits here and there. I know, it's not leaps and bounds forward, but you do see him take these little steps to becoming the person he eventually becomes. It's because in this episode, he established a rule, no matter what the circumstances may be, when it comes to a bad guy, he won't kill anyone. That will be his number one rule, at least, so it's he has to set boundaries for himself. It's to separate him, on that line between justice and vengeance. It's obviously, Batman's a huge vigilante and he doesn't go about things the most legal way, but not killing them is his way of I might not be doing, like I said, the most legal way, but at least I am getting some form of justice to these bad criminals that are getting away. And it's we're kind of setting that up. And it seems like him and Alfred are going to continue training. It's interesting to see him change little by little. And we also found out about the Court of Owls, because basically they were like, hey, we're not going to, Catherine's like, we should kind of get involved, or basically we might have to worry about Gotham City burning to the ground. But the other dude who's obviously, at a time, I brought it up previously, I was like, we had seen the ring, and I was like, oh, so either he is Jim's dad, that he's not really dead, or he's someone related to Jim. Turns out he's Jim's Uncle Frank. But he was like, no, let the GCPD handle this. And Catherine's like, you have so much faith in him. I hope it's not misplaced, meaning Jim. So, and then later on, they were like, she was worried because she was like, oh, we would have had to step in if things had continued. And then basically we have young experiment Bruce coming into this. He's cleaned up a little bit and they're like, oh, you can be used to save this city. And he's like, oh, how can I save the city? And it's like, oh, you're just part of the plan. Like I said, at the end of the day, this is all for the purposes of, they're obviously in the shadows when it comes to Wayne Enterprises. Basically there's a lot of shady people there in Wayne Enterprises, and I think the Court of Owls is kind of letting them stay. I mean, granted, not unless a lot of its board members are part of the Court of Owls. I don't think they are. I don't think it's a majority of them are. Maybe there's a select few members, obviously, but more so than anything, it seems like there are some bad eggs amongst them. So it's kind of maybe the court kind of lets them do their own thing, because it's hey, let Wayne Enterprises kind of corrupt everywhere, then swoop in as a court and save the day, and just kind of, because like I said, obviously immortality is one thing they've aimed for. It's kind of a situation of they want to be around long enough to kind of mold the world into their image. First of all, Gotham is going to be that stepping stone, because obviously they've been in the backgrounds for a long time. They're a very long, old organization and everything. Like I said, we get bits and pieces of what their motives are. Even with what I've said about the whole immortality thing, that's one thing. And even then, that's kind of that was something we're working on with Strange. And I don't know if that's something that's kind of fell to the wayside since everything's happened with him last season. So it seems like that might be something that's no longer a concern of theirs, or maybe it really is. We'll just have to wait and see. But I can only assume it's yo, they want to remove the real Bruce from the circumstances, from the situation, and get, like I said before, get this Bruce to take his place. And it seems like they are heading that direction, because I feel like that's the only reason you would have a clone Bruce, is because you want him to fill the role, and it's like, have him under your control, because like the real Bruce, he's unpredictable. Too many times he's kind of gone behind their back and done something else, and it's like he's not malleable like they need to. Whatever they did to the other Bruce, it seems like they kind of messed with his head a little bit. So that definitely means we're definitely going to be seeing him a lot more in the future, possibly. That's definitely going to get confusing going forward, just because of it's not even like a Clayface situation. It's like, no. I mean, they've probably educated him into knowing everything there is to know about Bruce. So, like I said, he's cleaned up, and just the way he talks too. So, and then also you had his uncle, Gordon's Uncle Frank, played by James Remar. That's cool. He being like, okay, I guess I'm gonna have to talk to him. And she's like, the rules. It's like, yeah, if he doesn't, no one says no to the Court of Owls. So if Jim says no, he's basically going to bring him into it, because I guess to him it's like the Court of Owls is also his family legacy too, for the Gordons, because it seems like his dad had that particular ring. That was kind of the whole point when you saw the ring originally. It seems like his dad was part of that, so maybe, it's a Gordon thing too. We'll have to kind of wait to see how that all. I don't know. It's going to be interesting to see how he approaches Jim, because Jim is still in the dark about the organization. He's talked a little bit to Bruce with it, but he hasn't really gone into 100% detail. The only other person that really knows about it is Lucius. So not unless Jim goes off asking him, but it's like, I'm very curious to find out more about Jim's family situation, because his family never really comes up a little bit. That little bit we learned about his father was kind of the only time that's ever really come up. Obviously, his dad, he was in the law. He was a lawyer. I don't know if it was like he was either a DA or a prosecutor or something like that. I think he was in the military like Jim was. I'm not sure, but he referenced the fact is that the Gordons kind of have something dark inside of them, it takes everything for him not to bring it home to Jim and Jim's mom. I'm sure that's going to be something that kind of comes up, dealing with his Uncle Frank and everything. But that's one side of things. On the other side of things, we had to deal with the whole Nigma situation. I was actually surprised that Nigma just explained everything right from the beginning like that. All he did was kill the two guys beside that Oswald brought with him. I was like, oh, you're not playing continue. I thought you were going to play it a little bit more kind of hide behind the scenes. It's like, no, you're done playing hiding games. You've done playing your games because you've already ruined his reputation and everything. Basically hooks him, straps him down to Isabella's car, and is trying to, has a whole traps mechanism set up so that basically it drops acid on him. I love that conversation. You just be like, finally admit what you did to Isabel. He's like, yeah, I did it. I did it for your sake. It's like, what the hell would you tell me you did it for my sake? It's like, you would have killed her. No, I wouldn't have. Yeah, you would have. You killed your last girlfriend in Kirsten. And then it's like, you would have eventually done it to her too. And you would have hated yourself for it. So I did it for your sake. And then he's just like, and then, for Nigma, he's like, well, we won't know now, will we? And then he's just kind of, Oswald is like, I did it because I love you. And Ed got super pissed about it. He's like, don't tell me that. Because if you love, it's about self-sacrifice. It's about self-sacrifice. The fact is, you're willing to sacrifice something for the betterment of someone else. And it's like, you wouldn't do that. Because at the end of the day, when it comes down to things, you would sacrifice me in an instant along with anyone else, because all you care about is yourself. Luckily, a cop showed up and saved him. The moment that happened, I was like, okay, he's going to start screwing with you. Ed sent him there to kind of like, oh, what did you do? Oh, what did you do? Like, oh, I'm not here to help you. That, or he's going to be one of those pissed off citizens, like, oh, you're the mayor. Oh, I thought we were worthless. Blah, 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 I'm not going to help you, type of thing. But it turns out he helped him and everything, which, with what happens, the twist and everything, the whole thing was a setup and everything. Like, I don't know if that was a setup, because I was thinking, I think that's a little too coincidental for that cop to randomly show up and save Ed's life like that. I mean, to save Oswald's life like that. Maybe it really was pure coincidence, or maybe there was more to it, because you end up finding out everything is some smoke and mirrors type of situation. Even at the end of it all, when they were like, yep, oh yeah, Tabitha and Butch show up to kill Ed, and you basically have Oswald talking down to Butch and being like, at the end of the day, you're still just a muscle. You at one point in time, you actually had some power, you had some push, you had some pull. Now you have nothing. You're just the muscle again. And then Tabitha basically getting on him, having her whip wrapped around his neck and just taunting him, being like, oh yeah, remember what happened with your mom? I stabbed her in the back and you just did nothing. He's like, yet. And she's like, no, you didn't do anything. And then basically Oswald being like, oh, I'm not going to go with you. And then Butch knocks him out. And Tabitha looks at him like, are you stupid? She's like, you know you're going to have to pick him up now and carry him. And he's like, damn it. What's kind of proving Penguin's point that he doesn't really think stuff through. I also love that moment later on when it's like, Butch is like, yo, I'll get him talking in 5 minutes. And Tabitha's like, I'll get him talking in 3. He's like, why do you always do that? Why you always gotta like cut me down like that? Just always like, especially in front of other people and everything. And Barbara had to be like, shut up. But basically spilled it. Obviously, Ed kind of, Oswald I keep doing it. Oswald kind of figured everything out. And she's like, yeah, you're right. So basically, I'm kind of queen bee now, and I'm going to, I kind of got rid of everyone else. The table is clear now, the crime table and everything. It's going to be, it's kind of a new regime and everything. And it's like basically telling him to sell out Ed, because like if he brings Ed there, which will, at that point kind of take care of Nigma, because it's like he's a loose end and everything. At the same time, I was like, I mean, obviously Penguin's not going to do that, because he knows the moment he does that, you're just going to kill him anyway. So, like, there's no win. It's a lose-lose situation. And then he starts saying something I wasn't expecting him to. He was like, I'm not going to turn on Ed. And she's like, the person who betrayed you, the person you loved who betrayed you. And he's like, but did I ever love him? She's like, what? It's like, well, the fact is, I didn't self-sacrifice for him. Like, I did... I killed Isabella because I felt she was going to take him away from me. If I really loved him, I could have sacrificed my own happiness to make sure that Ed stayed happy. So it's like, I made that mistake before, I won't do it again. This time, I won't sell out Ed. I won't betray him. And it turns out, it's like, Nigma was so sure he would. And then Barbara's like, what do you want to do now? It's like, he doesn't actually know. He's like, because the plan was to have Ed, if I have Penguin die, knowing the fact is that it was impossible for him to love anyone. But now it's kind of like, now Ed doesn't know, because it left him confused, because he was so sure Penguin, it was impossible for Penguin to love. But it's like, hey, Penguin actually loved him. Part of me was thinking like Penguin was actually thinking like, oh, I don't love him because he was just a tool to me. Like, I just thought, because for Penguin, he's like, Nigma was the only person other than his mom to ever see him for him, look past everything, kind of saw the potential in him, and it's just like, oh, they became friends and everything. But the conversation ends up eventually, Penguin's at the dock, and then you have Nigma with the gun to him and being like, you know what? Oswald's saying like, oh, you're nothing. I'm the one that made you into the Ed Nigma that you are. The fact is, I love you. He's like, shut up and everything. And he's just like, I don't know. Basically, at the end of the day, Ed was like, I loved Isabella, and it's like, because of that, he ends up shooting Penguin. It's like, because it doesn't matter everything else. What does matter is the fact is he wants his revenge for what Oswald did to Isabella. So, and even at the very end, he still couldn't get her name right, because he was like, Isabel, and Barbara was like, I'm pretty sure her name was Isabella. Still couldn't get it right, even after all this time. So, once again, kind of proving that fact is that he doesn't care about anyone. But you have Penguin kind of sinking into the water, bullet wound, which obviously is like, well, from one, many different things. One, obviously he's not dead. He's Penguin. There's nobody going to kill off Penguin like that. Two, he got shot and he's in the water. Like people, no one in Gotham stays dead. That's impossible. No one stays dead in Gotham, especially from a bullet wound like that. Let's not forget, Penguin fell into the water faking his death at the very beginning of the series when Harvey was there to make sure that Jim put a bullet in him, and it's like he faked that. So it's like, especially one bullet to the gut. I mean, Fish was originally like that from like the end of season 1 to the beginning of season 2. She came back even after suffering a bullet wound or whatever. So, like, storylines have obviously come to an end. So I am curious whether they'll come back. Like the whole Mad Hatter situation. Is he going to be kind of a situation where it's like, because every season kind of has its new title. Like, the first half of season 2 was Rise of the Villains. The second half of the season was Wrath of the Villains. Obviously, this one's Mad City. I'm curious, will they continue Mad City going forward, just because it's kind of going to that half-season split. I think this would be classified as a winter finale. I didn't catch it. I know I mean, I know this now because I'm recording things out of order. So at the time of recording it, I assumed that was Lucifer's winter finale. I do know now at the time, this time it is Lucifer's winter finale. So I assume that this is Gotham's winter finale. But I know that's going to be super confusing the way, that's just honestly, if you never knew that, that's how I record these. I don't always record these in chronological order. Sometimes I like do it really back ass first, especially on Fridays when it comes to like Super Fantify. Like those are never recorded in absolute order. But the point I was getting to is like the fact is got Bruce's training, Selena and her mom. I'm wondering, is that going to come up again? The whole Frank, Uncle Frank and Jim. Also the whole Lee situation, because it seems like because Lee is not letting it go. It's like, oh yeah, the conversation I had with Jerome. It's like, oh yeah, I told him how you killed my husband and everything, and he thought it was funny. It's like you didn't even have to say that. And I don't know, like I say, it's one moment it's like you're helpful, and another moment you're just hating Jim's gut. It's like she's flipping back and forth because she's conflicted, because she does care about Jim, but she knows she shouldn't care about him because she hates him. But at the same time, she hates him even more because there's a part of her that understands why he did what he did. I'm sure the whole Jerome situation, I almost forgot to bring it up, is like probably pisses her off so much more, because it's like it's another circumstance of like, yeah, you didn't kill Barnes, yet you killed Mario. Oh, you didn't kill Jerome when you had the chance, but you killed Mario. So it's still there. And then you saw him kind of looking at her from far away. So it's kind of like, I don't know. I'm surprised we haven't seen Vicky at all. I'm wondering if they were moving her from the rest of the season or not. I hope we do see her a little bit more. I mean, obviously there's no more love triangle situation because everyone's kind of on their own now. You still got your fingers crossed, hoping for Jim and Lee. You know, something that was just crossing my mind, I meant to bring it up earlier, was the whole conversation about Nigma and Oswald, when he was talking about the fact is that did he ever really love Jim? And the way did he really love Nigma? The reason why I brought up Jim, I said why that kind of slipped out, was because I was thinking of Barbara. I was like, the way she was like, what? Part of me was wondering, is like, did she ever take some of that in herself to, question herself and Jim's relationship? Once again, they have not actually met up since like that Red Queen trip. It's like, I want to know how he interacts with her. Like, I want to know if it's any different. Does he treat her any differently? Because he's trying to go back on the straight and narrow path. Obviously, there's some bumps in the road, but he is kind of, going forward. I don't know how I hope you understand what I'm trying to say. I'm just kind of getting to that point. I'm having a hard time concentrating, keeping my head straight on one particular subject. So I just thought it would be, I just wanted to know if like she kind of took that for herself too. Like, did she ever really love Jim? Did she make any sacrifices? I mean, I'm sure she did. Once again, it's still crazy, dude. It's like, that'd probably be the weirdest thing, going back to season 1 at some point and rewatching that and seeing her the way she was then versus who she is now. It's just kind of like, wow, just completely different person. But obviously you have Penguin still being alive. Now, something interesting, I ended up catching it a little bit. I just happened to randomly see it at the end of one of like the preview. I ended up seeing long green pants, and then when it cuts to the title screen, like at the end of like, when Gotham comes back, it was a green question mark. So it's like, I'm guessing he's stepping up his Riddler game, because the fact is, they were like, Penguin explicitly was like, if you do this, there will be no going back. It's like, obviously you've killed people out of like out of like a murder out of compassion. Then there's already been situations where it's like out of, defense, survival, obviously, like self-preservation type of things. But it's like, this is the first time you're going to be outright cold-blooded murder and kill someone, especially someone that you love and care about. So I'm guessing he is going to step up his Riddler game. Just so curious to see how it all plays out. Looks like we will be waiting a little while. Like I said, the whole recording things out of order. Much like Lucifer, it will be a while. Though this comes back before Lucifer. I'd assume like a week before Lucifer, because this comes back April 24th to Lucifer's May 1st. So. But nevertheless. And now moving on to this week's episode of Lucifer. Picking up where last week's episode left off, we have Chloe she got poisoned by Jason last episode, Tim Decay. And now her and Lucifer are trying to find a cure. At first, they're like not telling anyone, which is like, Lucifer's like, why won't you tell anyone? Especially like, because you're talking to Ella and everything. And she's like, she doesn't want Ella to know because it's like it would distract Ella. And then basically she'd be so focused on that. She wouldn't be focusing on trying to find a cure and everything, which led to that conversation where Ella was like, oh man, because if there was someone poisoned, oh my God, they'd be so screwed. They'd be bleeding out their nose, get fainty, and then basically their organs will just start, they die horribly and everything. And Lucifer's like, okay, thank you for painting such a picture. But obviously everything got found out when she ended up fainting. So many things. Okay, for one of my favorite moments in the episode was when Lucifer and Dan working together, which is like, it's so cool that that's such a regular thing now, that's popped up quite a few times this season, because they've kind of, figured things out. I mean, granted, I'm sure Dan doesn't really know about the whole Lucifer and Chloe thing, or just how, even in general, how Lucifer feels about Chloe, but nevertheless, it's just interesting to see them work together. They end up confronting a guy that has something to do with the drugs, as well as, connected to Jason. And then you have him, the dude basically has his guys beat up on Dan a little bit. And then Dan's like, oh man, we're screwed. Basically, like, I messed up. And Lucifer's like, wait, what? This wasn't all part of the plan? He's like, no, it wasn't. I'm now, Chloe's gonna die. He's like, wait, so you want me to, so it's okay for me to handle these? He's like, wait, what? What do you mean? And basically unhandcuffs himself. You could have gotten out at any time. He's like, yeah. Well, why didn't you do anything? Because you told me not to. You told me to follow your lead. And he was like, I thought this whole thing was part of your plan. And he starts beating up the dudes. And Jan's like, well, why did you wait till after they start beating me up to do something? Once again, it's like, I'm following your lead and everything. And I love the fact that the guy was like, Lucifer's like, all right, stop beating around the bush. Just tell me what you want. What do you really desire? And the guy was like, I want people to love my art. Because essentially people buy his art because they want, obviously it's a front for other stuff, for him to get them what they want, but also it's just because he's an amateur artist and everything, and he was like, he wants them to actually buy his art. That's what he wants to feel appreciated, not just for the things he gives people, but also for his art. And Lucifer's like, all right, fine. Lucifer decides to buy some of his paintings, so. And for him, they get the ingredients. Yes, I said the ingredients because he doesn't have the recipe. The only person that has the recipe is Jason, but he's dead, so there's no getting that. But then, talking to Charlotte, it kind of sparks an idea in Lucifer's head, and it's like, hey, best way to do that is to talk to him directly. He is in hell, and all I have to do is go there. And so to fix that, all I have to do is die. Which he has a conversation with Charlotte, Aminadel, and Maze, and they're all just kind of like, no, don't do this. That's stupid. And then all of a sudden Lucifer's like, okay, so what do you think? Turns, the camera pans over, there's Linda in the middle of this, like, okay, I didn't even catch half of what you were talking about. It's like, this is what you celestial beings do when you just gather around. You have conversations like this all the time. And then Aminadel super pissed. It's like letting in a human about this whole situation. And it's like, yeah, basically Linda's like, the shoes on the other foot now. It's like, you lied to me and manipulated me. It's like, now I've known the truth the entire time. Because I wasn't sure about that conversation Aminadel and her had. I wasn't 100% sure if he knew, but definitely this proves like he didn't know at the time that she knew. But now he does, so. And I love it when the conversation comes down to it being like, okay, so basically it's settled, they're going to kill me. Charlotte obviously abstained from it and everything, but then he's like, okay, so who wants to kill me? And then Aminadel and Maze both raised their hand, because basically he wants Linda to be there to revive him back to life. And at the same time this is all happening, obviously, they kill him and send him to hell, which I love the fact is how they go about it. It's like defibrillating him, and it's like Maze is like about to do it, but she can't do it. She's like, Linda, you do it. And she's like, wait, what? No, you're supposed to kill him, and I'm supposed to bring him back. That's the deal. It's like, I can't do it. And Lucifer was like, oh, screw it. Grabs the defibrillators and defibrillates himself and kills himself. I love how things because this is actually a very good episode in the sense of overall just a very good episode, but also because this is our first look at hell a little more in depth. We got a little peek at it in the season finale last season, but this time we got a little more of a look at it. That basically, obviously, there's corridors connecting, everyone's personal hell. In Jason's particular hell, he's basically reliving the accident that basically drove him to become the madman that he is. And he's like, all these people are like, oh, calling him a coward and a murderer. He's like, oh, you don't understand. This is all because of, they just don't understand, blah, 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 blah. Well, because basically what Lucifer explains, Maze had originally brought it up, it's like, oh, there's so many doorways that you could end up getting lost down there in hell, because he's not the ruler of hell. So I'm guessing because he doesn't kind of run things anymore, that basically, it comes up in the episode, but he is vulnerable to hell's power. he's not immune to it because he was top dog in hell, but now that he's kind of, I'm surprised that hasn't come up. Maybe that'll be a future storyline, someone replacing him in hell. Actually, like some demon rises up to it. Oh, that was kind of an interesting thing too that we learned, because obviously Lucifer ended up getting stuck. I need to stop getting ahead of myself. The first thing I was going to talk about is the fact is that in hell, like, you're only trapped there for as long as you believe you deserve to be there. And for Lucifer, he's like, he's never seen anyone escape, obviously with the exception of his mom, but because no one is ever able to like be like, oh no, I don't deserve this and escape, because hell is basically a hell you create for yourself. It's from your own need to punish yourself for what you've done. In Jason's case, that accident over and over again, he denies it, but like, oh yeah, no, it's not my fault. You don't understand. It's because deep down he knows he messed up, that it was his fault, that he could have done something, but he chose not to. So it's, his brain knowing, well, him saying one thing and his heart knowing it not to be true, essentially. But then you have Lucifer getting stuck down there because he ends up opening a door and it ends up being his own hell. And that hell is killing Uriel over and over again, constantly stabbing him. And it basically, Uriel being like, oh, that's you wanted this, Lucifer. Obviously, it's not the real Uriel, because the real Uriel is completely dead. At first, I was like, oh, is he in hell? But then, Lucifer brought up the fact is Azrael's blade kills celestial beings in a sense that it reduces them nothing. So there's no heaven or hell for them, which coincides with demons. Is the point I was going to make before. It's like Maze ended up bringing that up, that as a demon, she doesn't actually have a soul. So when she dies, she dies. There's no heaven or hell for her. So that's why she can't go back to hell. I mean, obviously she could probably go along, like if there was like, because it seems like there's no like, oh, snap your fingers, there's a magical portal. It's like circumstances have to like put you in hell and bring you back from hell. So the only reason why she was able to get here was because of Lucifer. So hence the whole reason why last season she held on to that feather of his as a means of possibly going back home. Because initially it was Linda who was suggesting like, oh, kill me so I can go to hell. And then like, to get Lucifer back. And then she's like, Mace is like, how do you know that when you die, you'll go to heaven? You'd go to hell anyway. You might go to heaven. She's like, obviously there's some things in my past that you don't know about. It kind of coincides with certain things about this episode too. Like the fact is you have Dan and Ella all doing their thing, trying to gather the ingredients and everything. And one of the particular ingredients they need, she has to get from a guy that she's like, oh, he's not going to be so willing to give it to me. So she's kind of sneaking in to get it. Her and Dan. Guy pops up. His name's Ricardo. Turns out he's Ella's brother. Because obviously Ella brings up the fact is that she used to kind of steal cars back in the day. There's one of the ingredients they needed for the antidote for Chloe was, I don't remember what it was. It was something connected to cars. And she knows that because she used to steal cars back in the day, which the point I was bringing up is because in the episode where Maze, Chloe, Linda, and Ella all kind of had a ladies' night out, basically they let stuff slip. Like Linda brought up the fact is that I think if I remember correctly, she used to be a phone sex operator. Ella brought up the fact is that she used to be a thief, that she stole cars, which this is kind of built upon that storyline. And the person is her brother, Ricardo. And they basically haven't had the best relationship because it's like, well, she works with the police and he's a criminal. And he's always been worried that it'll kind of trail back to the situation of like, oh, she'll lead some cops or something to his operation and stuff like that, which she's like, that it doesn't work. It's not like that, It's like the only reason why we're here is because I need to get something. I'm not trying to bust you or anything or trying to get you busted. I'm only doing this for the sake of my friend, and I don't want her to die. Since the fact that they brought that up, though, I'm wondering does that mean we're going to get a little more about Ella's past going forward? Because the fact is, like, I don't know, they went through the trouble of setting up her brother and everything, so I get the feeling that's definitely going to turn into something eventually. So. But back to the hospital situation, it was like Charlotte comes back. She's like, "Okay, my son's in hell. And like, hell's not my favorite place." She does bring up something interesting that basically hell is always kind of pulling her back, but she uses, she resists it, so that's why hell isn't able to just suck her back in. But she's like, "I'll go in there if it means saving Lucifer." And I love the fact is that she's like, "Okay, so how do we do?" Before she even finishes, Maze used the defibrillator on her, kills her instantly, and Linda's like, Maze! She's like, oops. She did it without hesitation, because she's probably fantasized about doing it. But, you know, Charlotte is able to pull Lucifer back, making him realize, like, he legitimately did what he did to Uriel because it was for her sake, hers and Chloe's, because him getting his way meant them dying. Uriel getting his way meant them dying. But at that same time, Charlotte kind of gets swept up in it too, and she's like, "Oh, my beautiful Uriel, you're here. I'll never let you go again." It's like, "Oh, we can be a happy family again." Because she admits that she messed up on so many parts, because like she even admits like she starts thinking it's like, "Oh, it's her fault," because it's like none of that would have happened if she hadn't tried to manipulate. You know, she's like, at the end of the day, it's like all of it happened because of her, because she was in the situation because she didn't just go with Uriel and stuff like that. That things played out this way. She manipulated Lucifer and Chloe. That basically she deserves this essentially, but Lucifer pulls her back away from Uriel. So, and they go back topside and able to find a cure for Chloe. But sadly for them, it's such a crazy episode, like how it all plays out. The fact that at the end of it all, that basically Lucifer distanced himself from Chloe, because for him it was all. Everything that's happened has been part of like his dad's plan, because he had confronted Amenadal because he was thinking it was Amenadal behind it all, but then Amenadal was like, "Brother, we've all been manipulated. This has all been Dad's plan," and that's why he's distancing himself from Chloe. Chloe's like, you know, there's not been time to talk about us, so we should talk about us. But you know, this Lucifer just can't do that, because it's like finding out that his dad had a part to play in Chloe being in his life and everything. And his mom is like, "It's okay. We can stand up against your father and everything." It's like, you know, because she admitted like she wanted Lucifer on her side when she went up against her dad, when she went up against God. And then Lucifer's like, "I don't care. Like, you've lied too much. You know, you pretended to love me." She's like, "I do love you. It's like too late. You know, you wanted my heart broken. Well, you got what you wanted, Mom. My heart's broken." And he leaves. And, you know, you see Charlotte actually hurt. The sad thing is with Charlotte, you don't know whether that's genuine hurt of like, oh, she's lost her son, or is it like, oh, she lost the pawn that she needed? Because it's like, because even Lucifer himself says like, you're just as bad as Dad, maybe even worse. She's like, at least Dad is upfront about who he is. You pretend to be this certain way while manipulating people. At the end of the episode, Chloe's trying to track down Lucifer. She's been trying to call him, can't get in touch with him. Goes to Lux, goes up to where his place, and sees that he's gone. He left. And it's like, because Lucifer's just trying to get away from everything. And it's like, that sucks, because it's like, just when her and Lucifer were getting somewhere, it's like, he's gone now. You know, like, not only, like, that's her partner too. It's like, not just relationship wise, even before all that, like, I don't know. It's sad to see that from what you see, like Lucifer, like you've never seen him. Like he's given up, you know. The last time he was kind of like this, willing to give up, was near the end of season 1 during that whole situation with Malcolm. Like, you know, being framed for that dude's death. Like Lucifer getting blamed for all those murders and everything, like that were Malcolm, but he was trying to frame Lucifer for it and everything. That was the last time we've seen Lucifer really give up. And it's like in this circumstances, it's just like he gave up to another degree. It seems like he's leaving everything behind. So what exactly that means, I don't know. There's so much stuff like, dude, like, because Uriel had passed, it kind of got brought up again. The fact is, Uriel was like, "Oh yeah, the fact is that there's some, you know, I told you, you know," because basically it was his subconscious talking to him, obviously not really Uriel, but he brought up the fact is like, "Oh yeah, when I died, I gave you a message," and that message was like, "Oh, the last piece or one of the pieces is here." And it's like, Lucifer didn't think anything of it at the time, because it's like, oh, it's just the gibberish of a dying man. But it's like, no, apparently it was a clue to something. And it's like, to what exactly? I don't know. Maybe it's connected to whatever situation Chloe's got going on. Maybe her being a miracle baby, like her being a miracle, wasn't specifically aimed at Lucifer. I think I brought that up last episode. Like, the fact is that there is more to it than that. Like, she's meant to be a miracle for something else, that something greater is out there that she has to help deal with, or she's kind of a weapon against. And that basically Lucifer just happens to be weak to it, because it's like, she's also meant to do that to something else. It's kind of what I brought up last time. I don't know, like, legitimately in the back of my mind, I start thinking, like, are we talking, like, the apple of Eden or something like that? Last piece of it? Like, what is it, this last piece? Is it something that God wants, like, or needs? Is it something divine, or whatever the case may be? once again, also bringing up the fact is, since we're referencing again, we saw it in Hell and everything. I'm gonna bring it up again. I want to see Azrael. Obviously we've gotten to see one of his other siblings. Apparently he's got a crap ton of them. So hopefully we get to see more in the future, especially Azrael, because like it's like her blade's there. So it's kind of like, where the hell is she? But also, like, what does this mean going forward for everyone in the show now that Lucifer's just up and disappeared? I mean, what does that mean for Maze, Amenadal, Charlotte? You do want to give Charlotte the benefit of the doubt, like, oh, she's a caring mother, that she just, like, she feels like she's let down her son, because it's like, it does seem like she is apologetic for everything that she's done, like, but it seems like at the end of the day, you still can't argue the fact is that she is still after her own, like, this is all for her own personal revenge. Which also, side note, how did she get out of hell? Like, hell means finally it being like, oh, you're not the one responsible for something. Like, obviously you would think her hell would be kind of similar to everyone else's, or maybe she was put in a special place of hell, like where she didn't have to relive stuff like that. Maybe she was just locked away. I don't know, because it does beg the question, how did she get out of hell? That was never really brought up. So this episode kind of brought that question up too. It's like, he's never seen anyone ever escape hell, because you're kind of punishing yourself. So it makes you wonder, what was her punishment like in hell? Like, what did she kind of have to relive over and over again? So there's also like this moment in the episode where we had Trixie talking to Amenadal, and then she's like, that basically he's trying to help do, essentially she's like, there was a Trixie's like, oh, the bad man did this to my mom. It's like, why are there bad people? And Amenadal's like, I don't know. He's like, but there's, he likes to think there are more good people than bad people in the world. And then Trixie's like, you're one of the good people. And he's like, I try to be. Like, I'm not sure, but he's like, I want to be. She's like, you are, and hugs him. To me, that signifies so much, because that means, I'm sure it's going to change how Amenadal goes forward. Like, because like for him, he's probably been like, obviously he's got problems with his dad. So I don't think his motives are as vengeful as his mom's are. Obviously he probably wants to talk to his dad more than anything. I get the feeling Charlotte, the moment she gets the opportunity, you can see it going either way. Either she's going to kill him, or she's going to lock him up in a cell to basically get him back for all he's done to her. With everything setting up the way it is, the fact that she got introduced to Charlotte also makes me think at some point we're going to get introduced to Lucifer's version of God too. I say that because obviously you have shows like Supernatural, which also have, they have Chuck. I know this because there was also that joke that Supernatural kind of had about Lucifer too. That's not the point. Nevertheless, so I get the feeling this whole setup is going to lead to that, whether it's going to be like a season finale type of thing, or just pop up at some point, or maybe it's always going to be like a talk about him but never really see him, always kind of working behind the scenes type of thing. Like, once again, that's the sad thing is, like, I think Lucifer thinks, it's hard to say, because it could either be that he is right, that his dad is manipulating him, trying to, for good reasons, obviously, but you should never manipulate your children, because obviously that's just going to make them rebel against you even harder. Or it's just something else that happened, that he actually didn't have any intentions of ever letting like that happen, that Chloe and Lucifer found their ways to each other. Because I think that's the point, is to kind of eventually have Lucifer be like, oh, that what was between him and Chloe was real, that they got there on their own. And I just kind of my brain, because I feel like that's where the season's going to eventually go. It's like, okay, when he finally makes this realization, whatever the circumstances may be, Chloe ends up finding out what Lucifer really is, that he really is Lucifer. And that's going to decide whether they go forward or not. Because that's going to pop up at some point, because that's why Lucifer's always like, he's very upfront about what he is, but he doesn't actually show her like he did Linda, because he's afraid of how she might react. I mean, granted, he didn't show the same courtesy to Linda. I mean, he finally showed her his true form, because it was like, he knew it was the only way he's going to make progress. Obviously, she didn't take it the best way, but it does beg the question, I want to know what Chloe would, because like I said, I love that about shows when like there's always a partner or something that finds out the truth. Using another example, the show Grimm, when Hank and, eventually Wu ended up finding out about the whole Grimm situation with Nick. So it's kind of a similar circumstance. I'm like, I want to know what everyone's going to, like, will it be a situation where Ella or Dan will ever find out? Trixie kind of knows to a certain extent. Like, no one would take her seriously because she's seen that side of Lucifer, but still. And what it means for Chloe as well, because it's like I said, she's being stabbed, like, obviously she's going to be super concerned for him, probably trying to track him down and everything. But if he does return, when he comes back and everything, will they ever be able to pick up right where they left off? Maybe it'll be a situation where at least her and Dan getting back together, like, because it seems like that does seem like a potential obstacle, because obviously Dan still has his feelings for her. I mean, she's trying to move on and everything, but the moment she tries to move on, maybe she'll look at it as like things were getting too serious for Lucifer, so he turned back into his old ways, and now, there's nothing between them anymore. It's like, oh, we're just back to having a professional relationship type of thing. So just kind of where my brain is, my thoughts about kind of where things could go. I have to do this because sadly we will not be getting any new Lucifer until May 1st is the date I look up. I didn't, because I was wondering, because, obviously that show APB starts next week, and I was like, okay, it comes on at the same time as Lucifer. I was like, okay, so obviously Lucifer is going to take a little break, like a week off, and then eventually APB finds a new night or something. That's what I was thinking. But then I looked it up, it's like, nope, it's taking like a good long break, which sucks, but it's like, because I want it so bad. I want it to keep going. I think this counts as Lucifer's winter finale, I think. I could be wrong, but, I guess I will just have to wait till then. It sucks, but I'll just have to wait. I'm so interested to see how everything plays out, so. But really, that's all I'm going to talk about in this episode. Till the next time we meet, be happy, be safe, live life to the fullest, and enjoy it. Good day and goodbye.